Previously in this series we've looked at Gerstlauer and B&M, but now we're going to take a step down and we're looking at Vekoma. But before we start, we're going to go through some honourable mentions. But wait, there aren't any. They're all shit. Vekoma stands for Weltkönig Fabrik. Wait, I just realised if you put it backwards, you get makeover, and that is exactly what they are doing currently with some of their older models. They're updating them. We've seen the SLC become an STC, and the first one has started testing Halzuberkopf at Tripsreal. We've also seen a new next generation flying coaster at Phantasialand Fly has now been spotted testing. But anyway, Vekoma were founded in 1926 and they began by making farming equipment. It wasn't until the 1970s that they first joined the amusement industry, forming a partnership with Aerodynamics, who licensed Vekoma to use their track design, which is why old Arrow and Vekoma coasters are often confused because of this similar track design. In 2002, however, Arrow became defunct and Vekoma worked independently until 2018, when they were taken over by Sansei Technologies, who also own S&S. During their lifetime, Vekoma have manufactured well over 300 roller coasters, with over a quarter of them being SLCs and boomerangs. I have ridden more than 10 Vekomas, but this is only going to be a top 10 because of the reason I harshly mentioned in the intro. So number 10 is a pretty bad one, but in my opinion it's not as bad as some people make it out to be. It's Guderick's at Park Asterix, and yes, this is rough, but some people think it's one of the roughest coasters in the world, and I honestly can't agree. I've been on some other coasters that are a lot more rough than this one. It's somewhat enjoyable, but you can't re-ride it at all because it will give you a headache just after one ride, but I think I've been on a lot rougher coasters, so there it is, Guderick's at number 10. Next up is Express Platform 13 at Wallaby Holland, and while the ride layout is pretty horrific, the indoor queue is actually amazing. There's a section which almost feels like a scare maze. You've sort of got to run through it. There's lots of special effects which really add to the experience. I also think that it has a great launch, but the rest of the ride is boring, where it's not rough, and where it's meant to be exciting, it is rough. I sound like a dog. Number 8 is Big Thunder Mountain at Disneyland Paris, and this is a ride that didn't really do much for me. It's got 3 lift hills, so of course it's a really long ride, but it's a bit rough, and as a family coaster that's never going to be a good thing. It does have some areas of great theming, but I also feel that some areas of it are slightly deprived. They need a bit of TLC. But yeah, there's not a lot to say about this one. I kind of did it in a rush because I wanted to get the credit before we had to leave the park, so I've not got a lot to say. Number 7 is Vogel Rock at Efteling, and you may be wondering why there's a black screen, and that's pretty much what the ride is. The ride does take place indoors, and as I can remember, there's not really any lighting at all, but it does have quite a beautiful station. It seems a bit old and tacky, but it still gets the fairy tale kind of feel that you're looking for. It has some intense helixes in it, but nothing that good. Number 6 is at my home park Flamingoland. It's Velocity, and this does have one very good launch. After riding one of the same model booster like at Toverland, I can tell you that this one is a lot better. The speed is definitely noticeable with this one. You can get some brilliant airtime on that first hill after the launch, but yeah, the ride is definitely quite rough, and the restraints are fairly uncomfortable, although they do feel unique to just a standard roller coaster, but they do push very hard on your cot. Starting off the top 5 is Speed of Sound at Wallaby Holland. This is the only Vekoma boomerang that I've ridden, and from other people's opinions as well as my own, I can tell you that this is probably the best one that there is. It has an onboard soundtrack, and for me it's one of my favourite roller coaster soundtracks. You heard it earlier on in this list as a background track. But it does have some very intense portions as well. The inversions are very intense, especially if you ride it later on when it's warmed up. It can make you grey out and possibly even black out, to be honest. So the second and final roller coaster at my home park, Flamingoland, is Kamali. This is the number 4 in this list, and this is probably one of the best SLCs that there is in the world. There is one other clone of this specific layout somewhere in China, but it is fairly unique for SLC layouts because of course there's only one other, so you don't see this type of layout on an SLC very much, but I do think that it fits the area that Flamingoland have very well. It is very intense at some parts. It's fairly smooth for an SLC, but it's not that smooth. I've noticed that it has started to get rough over the previous season, but hopefully they can maintain it. When we finally open for 2020, it will get a lot better. Now, the top 3 coasters in this list I have mainly picked because they are all perfectly smooth. The first one is at 3rd place, Python Efteling, and this has some very intense vertical loops. That is the highlight of the whole ride. You do grey out on both of them, and probably some people may black out as well. It has been retracked since it was very rough before, I heard. It's also been fitted with new trains, so it's got vest restraints so that you don't get headbanging at all. And while vest restraints aren't perfect, they're a lot better than the ones that sit next to your ears and give you lots of headbanging. The drop as well is actually quite good, but only really towards the back row. Number 2 is an awesome roller coaster that really caught me off guard, Space Mountain at Disneyland Paris. I did not know a lot about this ride before I rode it because it's inside. It does launch up that hill, which is a brilliant way to start off the ride. It is a really good launch, and you can get a little pop of airtime as you reach the top if you're in the front row, I would say, as you crest over. But when you get inside, there's lots of cool lighting effects. It has 3 inversions, one of which is a corkscrew, but I'm not actually sure what the other ones are. Like I said, it's in the dark, so you don't even know you're going upside down when you do, but it does have some very intense parts, and it's a long ride. However, number 1 is the Rock and Roller Coaster, also at Disneyland Paris. This is at Walt Disney Studios. However, this ride is now closed, but it is getting a retheme, so I expect that it will open again with the same layout. Therefore, I think it's fair to put this in this list. This is a clone of Express Platform 13, which was at number 9, but this is a lot smoother, and I think that's probably because it's all indoors. According to RCDB, this ride is actually faster than Express Platform 13, and I can agree with that. I think the launch does feel a bit more intense, but the launch, to be honest, it's one of the most iconic things I've seen on a roller coaster. I love the lighting sequence either side, and it's brilliant to watch when you're waiting in that queue. But overall, the ride makes brilliant use of music and lighting, and it's got a cool little pre-show, and I really like this ride, but I think I will miss it. I don't think the Iron Man theme will be as good, but we will see. So those are my 10 favourite rides from Vekoma, and they are quite a controversial topic to talk about, with some of their older rides being quite bad. So what's your opinion on Vekoma? Let me know in the comments, and leave a like if you have enjoyed, of course. I'm also supposed to ask you to subscribe, but if you don't want me to litter up your subscription page, then you don't have to. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Goodbye, everyone.